Big Fani Willis may not have scored the victory that a lot of people say she did. She had 2 plea deals come through, but as we talked about with Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro, both of those cases are going to be dismissed. And do they implicate Trump at all? Even this guy, Andrew Weissmann, says maybe not. We're going to see what he said in a couple of posts, and then hear some reaction to those 2 plea deals, including from Trump, who had some comments about Sidney Powell that he made in public and that he posted on The Truth. But I wanted to share this with you. Remember that we had 2 plea deals that we covered, and there was a lot of fun to actually go through both those, Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro. And after the Chesebro proceeding, we heard Donald Trump's name come up a lot in that. Remember this. Chesebro pled guilty to count 15 of 41. And this guy, his name's Ryan Goodman, and he's over on the X, and he was a little excited about this. He said, listen, he said, here's the significance of the Chesebro guilty plea. He says the key is who can Kenneth most implicate. He says, 1, Giuliani, including getting a false electors knowing that he was not contingent on litigation. Eastman, could it be a giant step closer to? And very bad legal news for Trump. And there's Chesebro in there. There's Nathan Wade, who's, palling around with Big Fani. And we watched this plea deal, man, and this was a pretty good plea deal, I think, for the defense. They were excited about this. He got no jail time. He's going to have his entire case dismissed. The whole thing's going to go away. So what gives? Well, Goodman says in court proceedings, Chesebro just admitted specific sets of facts that squarely implicates Giuliani, both state and federally. He says, look at this Georgia charge and the names of all the co-conspirators, right? This was the one that Chesebro pled guilty to. But this is it. This is the whole thing. It says, and the grand jurors in the name here, and Trump's name came up a bunch, and we were a little concerned about that until we started listening to it. And then we realized they were talking about the Trump campaign and not Trump individually. But here's what they say. That Chesebro specifically pled guilty to this. And I'm going to show you that Weissmann and others are saying this is not accurate. That on the 6th of December and the 14th day of December, these people, Chesebro pled guilty to this, unlawfully conspired to knowingly file the certificate of votes for the 2020 electors from Georgia, signing a document that contained the false statement. We, the undersigned, being duly elected and qualified electors from the state of Georgia for the vice president, hereby do declare blah, 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 right? They signed the letter. They filed the so-called false documents. Okay, that's the felony. So that's basically all that he's got to talk about. I signed a document, mailed it off. I pled guilty to 1 felony of that. I'm Chesebro. The charges will ultimately be dismissed, but I literally signed a piece of paper. Okay, that's all the facts that he basically did. We, the undersigned, being duly elected, filed it. And the defendants, acting as co-conspirators, incorporated, placed it in the mail, and they mailed the document to the chief judge of the Northern District of Georgia. And all of that was an overt act to affect the object of the conspiracy, and so on. So he didn't plead guilty to RICO. He didn't plead guilty to anything else other than signing a document, right? Plea deals and guilty pleas and blah, 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 even though I think they're having a difficult time distinguishing between a guilty plea and a guilty conviction. You can have guilty pleas all day long and never have a conviction. I've personally helped people get that done many times. Cases get dismissed. It's like it never happened. Pretty incredible. Exactly what's going to happen here. So as these individuals are excited about it, we have here, how does Michigan and Arizona and Pennsylvania not indict Chesebro now? Why would Chesebro start talking if he's going to be indicted in other places? You see, he's already admitted to some conduct, but he's not going to start singing. Yeah, I was involved in this and this and this, and I helped Trump do that. And Trump did this, and blah, blah, blah. Of course not, because the feds could indict him. Arizona could indict him. You've got this guy and others saying Pennsylvania should indict him, and Wisconsin should indict him. So they say he just admitted to facts that would make for crimes under those states' statutes, right? Indicted in multiple different locations. But this guy, Andrew Weissmann, who we often, poke at here, he is agreeing with us. Important caveat, and this was our analysis last week. A defendant who pleads only has to admit the elements of the crime to which they pled, which is why Sidney Powell and, her specific charges were like hiring a third party, okay? Yes, she pled guilty, okay? But the elements of the crime for Sidney Powell were literally, she called somebody, hey, can you go, investigate this? They sent her a contract, crime 2. She signed the contract, crime 3. And lawyers hire third parties all the time to go do stuff, right? We had, at my law firm when I was there, we had investigators on robocall, on dial, speed dial, blah, 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 all the time, working on our DUIs and all of our traffic stuff, going out and reassessing the scene, blah, blah, blah. Happens all the time. So Sidney Powell hires somebody. Can you go investigate this? Sure. They have a conversation. Solicitation, that's a felony. Signs a contract, right? Execution. And the list goes on and on. She gets charged 6 6 felonies turned into all misdemeanors, 7 felonies, now 6 misdemeanors that will all be dismissed. And so when they bring her in there, they're not going to ask her about backroom meetings with Donald Trump. She's not going to testify to any of that. She's going to testify about hiring somebody, about signing a piece of paper, and about paying a bill. That's it. Same thing with Chesebro, okay? It's going to be the same conduct. And they say, and not every fact or conspirator is going to be here. And we don't have reason yet to think that Chesebro has done more than the minimum. So same thing with Chesebro. So now Chesebro, even though Trump's name came up a million times, he's only going to talk about signing the piece of paper and putting it in the mail. Like, that is it. In my opinion, they're not going to get anything else out of these guys. Now, we'll see what happens on this. But even Andrew Weissmann is throwing some cold water on this. Hey, important caveat, guys. Calm down over there. A defendant who pleads only asked to admit the elements of the crime, hello, and not every fact or every conspirator. And we don't have a reason yet to think that Chesebro has done more than the minimum. And he's got a couple other posts on this, and so I clipped them. He says, look, here, people are wrongly assuming that Powell and Chesebro are now fully cooperating. If you're not familiar with him, we play him a lot because he's always on Inside Jen Psaki, and he's always talking to her about Trump, and he was involved in the original Mueller investigation, and so he is a lefty-ish lawyer, in my opinion. People are wrongly assuming that Powell and Chesebro are now fully cooperating. That still very much remains to be seen. Yeah, and there is reason to think that they are not, as they don't seem to have a global deal, including federal liability, which is the point about Jack Smith. All right, Sidney's not going to start talking. Chesebro's not going to start talking. I was involved in all these things, Fani. Any other questions? Because they're not going to get indicted again. So obviously, these were smoking deals. Both of them are going to have their charges dismissed. For my take on it, and we covered it here last week, we were reading and listening, and we were expecting Chesebro to get 3 to 6 months of jail. Now he gets 0. Why? Because Fani's case is crap. That's why. And you can see here, he's making that, I think, point without making that point. They don't even have a global deal. They're not going to be talking about anything. And this is a great point that was also made. And he also says, if Sidney Powell has not provided the Georgia prosecutors the keys to the kingdom regarding Trump and others, then the misdemeanor no jail deal will be judged rightly later as a travesty, given what Powell did to undermine our democracy. Right? And so this is the other point about this. We've been seeing a lot of others make the point that Fani is just trying to take this case and get a victory as it relates to Donald Trump, but that any other conclusions here are being saved. Okay, so Sidney Powell doesn't matter because it's all to save it for Trump. And there was a great response to this from our friend, I'm trying to find this as I talk right now. There it is, potentially criminal, over on X. I was trying to find this thread. All charges will be completely dismissed was my point. Okay, people like Bradley Moss were saying Powell pled to 6 misdemeanors, Chesebro to a felony. Says the price will keep going up for old holdouts. Speak now or forever hold your peace. And I said, absolutely not true at all. I said, all the charges will literally be completely dismissed upon completion of probation. They will not be convicted of anything. Chesebro's felony will be gone in 3 years. Sidney's maybe a little longer. But then this fella, Alf, says, yes, that's the way it works. In the meantime, they will have to testify against the remaining defendants, and the prosecution didn't have to reveal their case strategy. Huge win for the prosecution. Is it really? Because Sidney Powell was like one of the masterminds. So she's going to have no convictions and it's going to go away. Potentially says, if you charge someone, and by the way, Sean is over on YouTube. So if you're not already subscribed to Potentially Criminal, you should be. His pronouns are LOL and bruh. Check it out. So if you charge someone with a crime that carries 20 years, as they did with Sidney, and then offer them a no jail time misdemeanor that's ultimately going to go away, you either overcharge them or you're unilaterally offering an extraordinarily irresponsible reduction in the appropriate punishment. Which is exactly right. Exactly right. Such a good point. They came out and told us that this was the end of the world, that Trump and Sidney insurrected America. Big Fani gave us a bunch of lectures about all of that. And Potentially Criminal's right. It's very irresponsible for them to do that. So were they lying then or are they lying now? Make sure you're subscribed to his channel. Criminal Defense. Good analysis there. And we've got more reaction as well. I think MSNBC is agreeing. You can hear this guy's a little excited about Sidney Powell. But then at the very end of this clip, at the very tail end, you're going to hear him say, yeah, actually, actually, it might be harder for Fani than she thinks.
Start with that. Guilty pleas from the president's lawyer, or at least she was, Sidney Powell. How significant is that? What does it mean?
It shows the power of the racketeering laws, right? People who are caught on a racketeering indictment, they want to get out, and there could be many reasons. They actually did it, and they're getting a good deal from prosecutors. They don't have the money to fight, okay? And so this shows the power of it, and it's a great win for the prosecution. These are two witnesses who can certainly bring relevant, powerful evidence to convict the rest who go to trial, including Donald Trump. That said, I still think this sprawling indictment, even with the testimony of these two associates of Donald Trump, under the racketeering laws, could be more difficult for prosecutors than people expect.
Yeah, she's having a hard time on it over there, okay? She can't figure it out. She indicted like 19 people, and now she's getting how many convictions? So far, the ones we've covered, 0. And not looking good for him. But did you hear his point about this, about how RICO is being used so broad and expansively, and people don't have the time, they don't have the money, they don't have the resources? That's the point. They just go after everybody, right? They're going after Sidney, they're going after Chesebro, they go after everybody. And then when they don't have the case, they just give a smoke and plea deal and just get rid of them because the pain has already been caused. The damage has already been done. It's a disgusting thing that's happening in America. It should not be happening this way. To coerce people into plea deals because they don't have time, money, or resources because they're under the gun, under the scrutiny of a partisan political hack prosecutor in Fulton County, it's outrageous. Now, he admits that they're going to have some problems with it. I think you're starting to see those come to fruition. And Trump has also commented on this, and Sidney Powell in particular. And this is curious, but he says here, listen, Sidney Powell was one of millions and millions of people who thought, and in ever-increasing numbers still think correctly, that the 2020 presidential election was rigged and stolen, and our country is being absolutely destroyed because of it. True. Despite the fake news reports to the contrary, and without even reaching out to ask the Trump campaign, Miss Powell was not my attorney, and never was. In fact, she would have been conflicted. Miss Powell did a valiant job of representing a very unfairly treated and governmentally abused General Michael Flynn, but to no avail. His prosecution, despite the facts, was ruthless. Also true. He was an innocent man, much like many other innocent people who are being fully persecuted by this now fascist government of ours, and I was honored to give him a full pardon. And so that's a statement on Powell. Now, I think he's probably articulating there is that she was not his personal lawyer and that she was a campaign attorney or something like that. But Trump gets asked about this because now people are saying, oh, well, what about attorney-client privilege? Are you saying that there's no attorney-client privilege between you and Sidney now? Or maybe that exists between Trump and the campaign or the Sidney and the campaign? We're going to see how this gets unpacked, but Trump got asked about this. Here is what he said.
Concerned that you won't be covered by attorney-client privilege?
No, not at all. We did nothing wrong. We did nothing. This is all Biden. Indictments and impeachments, and this is all about Biden. You can't do anything right. The only thing they know how to do is cheat on elections and election fraud. This is all Biden stuff. All of these indictments that you see. I was never indicted. Practically never heard the word. It wasn't a word that registered. This is dirty politics. This is third world country. This is banana republic, they call it. This is never happened here. Never happened here. Why? Because I protested an election, you get indicted? It's ridiculous. You look at the document case. I'm covered by the Presidential Records Act. Biden isn't. And now it's turning out that Biden's got a real problem with those documents. A real problem.
We'll see.
We did
Special
nothing
counsel.
wrong. He did. But when you look at the kind of thing, think of it, because I protested an election, and I'm, by the way, 100% right about that. In fact, we're going to be releasing some numbers next week that will make your head spin.
Yeah, that should be fun.
But think of that. You get indicted because you protested an election. You know how many...
All right, so that's Trump, and he is out campaigning, and he's talking about the election. I didn't do anything wrong. And even when he was asked about that, Sidney Powell, are you concerned, Mr. President, about attorney-client privilege? No, not at all. Show what's in the documents. We don't care. And I think that there's a lot to that, right? I think that these really are illegitimate prosecutions. I am actually not concerned about somebody coming in and opening the floodgates because I don't think there was any criminality that happened there. Everything that he was doing was investigating an election, which was all legitimate and well within the purview of his office and his right to do that. So even Weissmann is saying, hey, sorry, everybody, calm down. Big Fani really stinking up the place over there. And so, of course, we'll continue to cover, my friends. Thank you for checking out and signing up for our newsletter at robertgovea.com. You can go there, get the daily reports sent to your inbox every day. And we'd appreciate you doing that so that we never lose contact with you in case something happens on YouTube. And that way you can forward the emails to friends and family and help expand what people know about what's happening in this country. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.